It's Christmas Eve. The children are still awake. George can hear them through the ceiling. 6 of the 9 still moving around upstairs, still wired on holiday excitement, still whispering and laughing past the hour they should have been asleep. He heads to bed. Jenny follows. The house smells like wood smoke and pine. Outside, Fayetteville is quiet, the way only small Appalachian towns get quiet in the deep of winter. Somewhere between 1 and 1:30 in the morning, Jenny wakes to a sound she cannot place. Then the smell. She opens her eyes to a ceiling glowing orange. She does not hesitate. She runs. She screams. She gets 4 of the children out. George gets out. He runs back towards the house. He runs back 3 times, 4 times. He tries the ladder. He tries the trucks. He stands barefoot in the snow, with the blood running from a gash on his arm, and watches the house compress into a column of white heat. When morning comes, 5 of his children are gone. Not one bone, not one tooth, not a button, not a shoe, just ash, and a silence that would outlive George and Jenny both. This is still Unexplained. Brief explorations of unsolved mysteries. My name is Mark. The Sodder family lived on Route 16, outside Fayetteville, West Virginia. George Sodder had come over from Sardinia decades earlier, built a trucking business, married Jenny, and together they raised 10 children in a 2-story timber frame house at the base of a wooded hill. By 1945, the family was not wealthy, but they were full. The kind of full that means a long table, shared shoes, and a Christmas where Marion, the oldest daughter, had come home from her job at the dime store with new toys tucked under her coat for her younger sisters. On the night of December 24th, several of the children had stayed up late. George turned in first. Jenny followed not long after. Their daughter Marion was still awake, as was older son John. Around midnight, the telephone rang. Jenny answered. A woman she did not recognize asked for a name she did not know, then laughed in a way Jenny later described as strange, almost hollow. Glasses clinked somewhere in the background. Jenny hung up, checked that the front door was locked, noticed lights on in 2 rooms downstairs, left them on, and went to bed. That call came in around 12:30 a.m. By 1 a.m., the house was on fire. George and Jenny escaped through their first-floor bedroom window with 4 of their children. Marion and John, both sleeping on the first floor, also made it out. That left 5. Maurice, 14, Martha, 12, Louis, 9, Jenny, 8, Betty, 5. George ran towards the house. He tried the external ladder he always kept propped up against the side wall. It was not there. He tried to climb the bank of the house with his bare hands. He tried twice, more before his son and his neighbor pulled him back. He ran to start one of his coal trucks, thinking he could use the roof as a platform. It would not start. He tried the second truck. That one would not start either. By the time the fire units arrived, the house was already beyond saving. The official record closed on the Sodder fire quickly. The coroner's jury ruled it an accidental blaze caused by faulty wiring, and declared all 5 missing children dead. The family buried empty coffins. And George Sodder, standing at 5 graves he did not believe in, started asking questions nobody wanted to answer. Here's what the official record needed you to accept. 5 children ranging in age from 5 to 14 burned so completely in a house fire that lasted roughly 45 minutes that not one identifiable piece of biological material remained. No bone fragments, no teeth, no clothing buckles, no remnants of the shoes they had been wearing. Meanwhile, investigators recovered recognizable household objects from the same ash including a toaster, and the intact barrel of a gun. George Sodder had no forensic training and no particular reason to be right. He made one phone call. He reached a worker at a local crematorium. That person told him something simple and devastating. Commercial crematoriums operate at about 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 2 hours. And even then, bone fragments remain and have to be manually ground down. A residential house fire, even a hot one, burns cooler and faster than that. It does not erase children. In 1949, investigators returned to the site with pathologist Oscar Hunter and a representative from the Smithsonian Institution. They found 4 human lumbar vertebrae, the bones of the lower spine. And for a moment you think, here it is. Here's the answer. Except the bones belonged to someone between 16 and 22 years old, too old to be any of the 5 missing children. And they showed no evidence of fire exposure. No charring, no heat damage. The specialists concluded they had almost certainly arrived in the fill dirt George used to level the foundation in the days after the fire. So what the official investigation produced 4 years later was evidence that appeared to come from somewhere else entirely. That is where the easy version of this story ends. So here's where it splits, and where it stays split. The first place most researchers start is the simplest. The fire killed the children. The investigation was incompetent, and the absence of remains reflects the limits of small-town forensic work in 1945. Not a conspiracy. Proponents point to what is sometimes called the pizza oven effect. George bulldozed dirt over the site within days of the fire. If embers were still smoldering beneath the surface, that layer of insulating soil could have created a sustained high-heat environment lasting far longer than the visible flames. Under those conditions, remains could theoretically have been reduced more thoroughly than a typical house fire would allow. It is a reasonable argument. The problem is that it requires a specific and convenient set of conditions to all be true at once. It also does nothing to explain the toaster, or the gun barrel, or why recognizable metal objects survived a supposedly extraordinary cremation event, while 5 children did not leave behind a single molar. The theory is possible. It just requires you to stop asking follow-up questions. The theory that makes investigators uncomfortable is the one involving George Sodder's mouth. See, George was outspoken. He had told anyone willing to listen, including members of Fayetteville's Italian immigrant community, exactly what he thought of Benito Mussolini. In October of 1945, roughly 2 months before the fire, a life insurance salesman came to the house. His name was Fiorenzo Nalutolo. When George turned him down, the man did not leave gracefully. He told George that his house would go up in smoke, that his children would be destroyed, and that this would be payment for the things George had said about Mussolini. George reportedly laughed it off. 2 months later, the same man served on the coroner's jury that ruled the fire an accident. Beyond that, look at the sequence of failures on the night of the fire. The ladder that was always against a house, gone. Found later at the bottom of an embankment 75 feet away, about 23 meters. Both coal trucks, operational the day before, refusing to start. The emergency water barrel, frozen solid. And the telephone line, which investigators initially said had burned through the fire until a repairman examined the pole and found the wires had been cut cleanly at 14 feet, roughly 4.3 meters, well above the fire line, at a height that would have required a ladder. The ladder that had gone missing. So if you accept that these were coincidences, you need quite a few of them to fall on the same night. If you do not, you're looking at a coordinated effort to neutralize every rescue mechanism George had available. And then the question becomes not what happened to the children in the fire, but whether the fire was even the point. The darkest version of this story is the one some researchers land on quietly. that the children were not in the house when it burned. They were taken before it started, or during the chaos of it, and the fire was set to mask their absence. Retaliation against George. Something worse. The evidence for this is circumstantial, but it's the only theory that fully explains why there were no remains. Because if the children were not in the house when it burned, there would not be. And then there's the photograph. In 1967, 22 years after the fire, Jenny Sodder received an envelope postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. No return address. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his mid-20s. On the back, someone had written, Louis Sodder. I love brother Frankie. Little boys. A90132 or 35. The man in the photograph looked, to the Sodder family, like an adult version of Louis. The handwriting suggested the sender knew details, names of siblings, a nickname that had never been made public. The family hired a private investigator and sent him to Kentucky. He acknowledged receiving payment and then stopped responding to every letter they wrote. The photograph sat on the family mantle for decades. No one has ever identified who sent it. No one has traced a notation on the back. It is possible the letter was a cruel hoax from someone who had read about the case and wanted to torment a grieving mother. It is also possible that someone, somewhere, knew something and chose the only way they felt safe to say it. And then the last theory, the one that lives in the margin of the case where grief and exhaustion tend to meet. Maybe the children died. Maybe the investigation was simply terrible. The forensics inadequate. The coroner's jury comprised by the presence of a man who had threatened the family 2 months prior. Maybe the cut phone line was sabotaged with no organized motive behind it. Maybe a troubled neighbor moved the ladder and nobody ever admitted it. Maybe every strange detail has its own small, unglamorous explanation, and the only reason they feel connected is because they all fell on the same night. That version of the story is not satisfying. It does not resolve anything. But neither does any other version. George and Jenny Sodder never rebuilt on the site of the fire. They created a memorial garden where the house had stood and put up a billboard along Route 16 with photographs of the 5 missing children. George died in 1969. Jenny continued wearing black in mourning for 44 years until she died in 1989. She never stopped believing her children had survived. Their youngest daughter, Sylvia, who had been a baby at the time of the fire and grew up in the shadow of 5 empty graves, carried the case into the new century. She died in 2021, and with her went the last of the first-hand witnesses. What remains is the garden. The billboard is gone. The photograph is somewhere in the possession of family descendants, and the ash beneath the Fayetteville hillside has kept whatever it knows. Back to where it started. Christmas Eve. The children still awake. The phone ringing at 12:30 a.m. with a laugh Jenny never quite forgot. Somewhere between that call and the morning, 5 kids vanished from a house that was supposed to have consumed them entirely. I do not know what happened to Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty Sodder, and I'm not sure anyone does. But I find it hard to sit comfortably with the official version when the evidence beneath it shifts every time you press on it. Maybe that discomfort is the most honest thing I can offer you. Still Unexplained is created and hosted by me, Mark Evanoff. If this show is worth your time, please follow wherever you listen and leave a rating or review. It genuinely helps more people find us. I'll be back soon with another one that kept me up. This is Still Unexplained. Brief explorations of unsolved mysteries. Thanks for listening.